Good evening and welcome to another edition of The View from 202. Great to see everybody in our community. I'm delighted tonight to have Nancy Long, one of our county board supervisors, and Carlene Beschen with me. And we're going to talk about fair maps. We're going to talk about redistricting in the best interest of the people of this state. And we're going to get there in just a second. Before then, a few community reminders. National Night Out is coming up this Tuesday, the 3rd, Tuesday, August 3rd. It is down in Haberman Park, and we're closing Fair Street from Main Street all the way up to Pond Street. And there will be all sorts of cool first responder vehicles. The police department will be there. The fire department, EMS, the county is bringing down their MRAP vehicle, whatever, some cool thing, armored sort of thing. We've requested MedFlight, maybe landing down in Gorse Park that night. The National Guard is bringing a climbing wall, so we're going to have a climbing wall.
Sounds fun.
Yeah, there are going to be 3 petting zoos petting groups in Haberman Park. There are different groups that are going to have booths in Haberman Park. The taco truck, Los Hernandez, is going to be there. Sue Benson is going to be there with the ice cream truck. The FFA kids are going to have, I think, grilled cheese and grilled ham and cheese. So you can come, enjoy the activities, get some food, cop a squat down in Gorse Park, and enjoy the evening. So please, it's a chance it's from 5 to 8 on Tuesday night. Chance to thank our first responders, learn more about our community, and celebrate all things Lodi. So please plan to come down. As an aside, I did challenge Chief Smith to a climbing competition, climbing the climbing wall. So if you want to see this person hanging from a harness off the boulders, come on down and check it out. But I am going to beat Chief Smith. So yeah, we'll see how that works. But in my head, I kick his butt and get to the top way quicker than he does. So we'll see. And then don't forget, August 14th is Susie Day here in the community. I believe duck raffle tickets are for sale already, and generally you can get them at a lot of businesses in the community. I'm sure they have them at the Pig and the Lodi Sausage Company and everything in between. And there's so much happening that weekend. There's the tractor pull on Friday night that the FFA alumni sponsor. There's the library fun run on Saturday morning that weekend. Nancy and I know I'm signed up. I don't know if I'll probably be volunteering. Yeah, me walking or running is a horrifying thought at that hour of the morning. The parade starts at either 10 or 10:30, and it's always a big parade right down Main Street. We're having a market over on Spring Street this year, so Spring Street's going to be closed off. Up on Sauter Street will be a live band, and food, and celebrating all things Susie the Duck and all things Lodi. And then Saturday night, there's a demo derby. The duck race is starting from the Pleasant Street Bridge at 1 o'clock. The ducks will get dumped into the creek, and they're going to end up over behind La Grata in the creek. And at 2 o'clock, they'll announce all the winners. At 1:30, Brady Steigoff and I, he's with Focus on Energy. We're going to be doing the big check presentations from our Save to Give program. So there's just a ton of stuff happening on Susie Day weekend. So plan to come. Oh, and Friday night, the 13th, is the Chalk the Walk event that Reach Out Lodi is sponsoring. And they're going to have a well-known chalk artist is going to be chalking some sidewalk down in Gorse Park West. So that's the side of the park along Highway 113. And then if you or your family wants to reserve some squares, some blocks to chalk, call Reach Out Lodi. You can do that. I think it's a $5 fee, but there are sponsorships. So we don't want the fee to be a barrier. We want everybody who wants to participate. So come out and chalk the walk on Friday night, and then enjoy all the fun stuff on Saturday. And then Labor Day weekend, of course, is when our beloved Ag Fair will be happening. So I think it's September 1st through the 5th. So mark your calendars, Thursday through Sunday of Labor Day weekend, always the biggest event in our community every year. And yes, I have been craving cotton candy and the chicken barbecue on Saturday. I was just talking about that today. It's always about food for me. But our fair is amazing. And if you want to volunteer, you can look on the Ag Fair's website. Also, we need volunteers for Susie Day. You can sign up to help out with that on the chamber website. And the last kind of end of the summer event is on September 18th, is the Brewbacue, which of course is right down here on Main Street. We shut Main Street down. You get to come down and pig out on ribs, and I think the chamber's going to have pulled pork sandwiches, and the salsa competition, the homebrew competition, the rib cooking competition. VIP tickets are on sale for that now. And of course, there's what is that called? The bag toss. Is there a name for that bag tournament? Cornhole. Thank you. So there's going to be a tournament that day anyway. I think 2 years ago when we had it, a lot of the alumni classes, class of 80, I know had a team. Go class of 80. Okay, moving right along. Sorry, I got to get out more. So anyway, that's everything happening. There's also a wine walk in November, and of course the holiday parade in December. So stay tuned. Just a reminder to shop local, even though we can get out a little bit more right now. We want to make sure that we're doing as much as we can with our local businesses. So please consider shopping here when you can before you have to go to environs beyond Lodi. And may I borrow your mask, Colleen?
Absolutely.
Just a gentle reminder, folks, the Delta variant is in our state. Honestly, it terrifies me as someone with asthma and pre-existing conditions. You all know that the CDC came out with updated guidelines yesterday, and I am guessing as the numbers continue to tick up in the state, we're going to be talking about masking up. So get your masks off, dust them off. It would not be a bad idea to even think about now when you're indoors with large groups of people starting to wear these. There are just, I heard a story on NPR, an interview with several people. They're thinking that the folks who, there's some people who experience this cognitive impairment after having COVID, that could be kicking people into Alzheimer's. So there is some, it's terrifying. I just heard it 2 days ago.
So what I did hear today about Wisconsin is that right now we have twice as many cases as a week ago in Wisconsin and 7 times as many as a month ago. We're up to 700 plus new cases today.
Yikes.
And 98% of those are people who have not been vaccinated.
Okay,
so
folks, so okay, so I'm going to climb up on my little soapbox. I'll be getting on it a lot tonight, but
stats are published on the Chronicle.
Oh, thank you. The COVID stats are published on the Chronicle. LodiValleyChronicle.com is the website. The county also publishes them on the county website. Get vaccinated. Okay, so we are blessed to live in a period of time where the science exists for these vaccinations to be created in a short amount of time. The technology behind them, the messenger RNA technology that's in Pfizer and the Moderna, has been researched for a couple decades. Please go to reputable sources to get your information. I think all 4 of us in this room are vaccinated. I will be the first in line. Yay. I will be the first in line to get a booster when it is necessary. I will just remind you that the more happy hosts that this virus can find, the more opportunities it has to create more nasty variants. Viruses want to live, so they're going to find any place they can to live and mutate and evolve in ways that are beyond our capacity. And when people talk to you about, well, they just had a mask update back in May and we got to take, folks, this is evolving. Okay, so get over it. We're learning more about the science every day. We're learning more about the variants every day. We're learning more about the vaccinations. So what you hear today is most likely going to be updated, or that's just the nature of the beast. No one has a hidden agenda. No one's trying to pull the wool over your eyes. It's just a fact. So I don't know about the rest of the world, but I trust people who went to school for umpteen years and are out for nothing more than my public health, our public health, our safety and well-being, and who know a hell of a lot more about viruses than I do. So I'm begging you. I think they were talking about having a vaccination clinic available at National Night Out. Stay tuned. I haven't gotten that confirmed. The medical clinic was looking into that. But they're readily available. Go on the county website. You can go anywhere.
They were trying to work them around the county too, so that Reach Out had one here a week or so ago.
Yep, just a week ago.
So look there. There's bound to be someone or a place, location relatively near you that you can get it. If not for yourself,
for your family and neighbors and friends. And if you know of someone who's vaccine hesitant and you've gotten a vaccine yourself, please go talk to them.
Yep.
The research is showing the best way to convince people to get a vaccination is to talk to them.
Yep.
Vaccinated people talking to those who are unvaccinated. Offer to take somebody with you. Tell them where a clinic is. I've gone from being slightly subtle to not at all subtle about their reach out is having shots on this day. Get your fanny up there. So support and encourage one another, and let's try to do our best to keep our community here safe and healthy for everyone who lives here. So now we're going to talk about an issue that you've heard me talk about endlessly on this, and that is gerrymandering. So I'm delighted that Carlene and Nancy were able to join me tonight. I've known Carlene for a couple of years now through the Columbia County Fair Maps work, and I'm going to ask Carlene to just sort of give a history of kind of gerrymandering and how we got to where we are today, and to give you a little heads up on why nonpartisan redistricting is so important for this next time around. So Carlene, would you start us off?
First, thanks for inviting me, because it's just a pleasure to have a ready audience to talk about this. I want to just start with gerrymandering goes back hundreds of years. This is not new to our century. It's not new to Wisconsin. It's happened for a very long time. It's actually named after I'll forget his first name, but his last name was Gary. He was a governor in Massachusetts, and he drew maps that favored his party. I don't even know what party it was, but he drew maps that favored his party, and it was written up in the paper and got to be called gerrymandering, and that was back in 1812. In the state of Wisconsin, after the 1964 Supreme Court ruling about one person, one vote, that made it necessary for congressional districts to have the same population, so that representatives wouldn't in rural areas have several hundred and in urban areas have several thousand constituents. In 1971, the first census following that Supreme Court ruling, the legislature and the governor in our state actually collaborated with one another and cooperated, and they made new district lines and they signed them into law. And I was in middle school. Yeah. That was the last time in the state of Wisconsin that there was cooperation around creating voting district lines. That's what we're talking about, voting districts. And so there are lots of different voting districts. There's municipal voting districts in your towns and villages and cities. There's county supervisory districts. There's counties. There's school districts. There's all kinds of things. School districts don't quite fall into this because that's a different thing. And then there are state assembly districts. There are 3 state assembly districts in every 1 Senate district at the state level. And then there are congressional districts. In other words, the people that we represent, we elect to represent us in the House of Representatives in Washington, D.C. So since that 1971 voting district collaboration, every time since then, the maps have gone to court until 2011. And that's a very sordid story, but there's a little bit more to that than just 2011. So in 81, 91, and 2001, there was split government in the state of Wisconsin. The chambers of the legislature were in different parties, or the governor was different than the chambers. And they couldn't agree, and the maps ended up in court, and federal court judges drew them. In 2009, the both chambers of the state legislature, the Assembly and the Senate, were controlled by Democrats, and the governor was a Democrat. And there was nonpartisan redistricting legislation proposed. Well, Democrats looked at the 2008 map, which was very blue county to county when Obama won the first time, and they said, why would we do that? We're going to draw the maps after the 2010 election. And so even though Jeff Smith, who was in the assembly then, really tried hard to get his fellow legislators to take this up, they didn't. And that's on them. Yeah. So then in 2010, you may remember the Tea Party town halls and the death panels for grandma, and
the pendulum swung.
The pendulum swung. And in 2010, both chambers of the state legislature and the governorship went to the Republicans. And that meant they got to draw the maps. Well, they didn't just draw the maps. They had been part of something called Operation Red Map. And if you don't know about it, you should just Google it, Operation Red Map. They had worked with several states, and they were actually kind of behind these Tea Party town halls. And there was a mass overturning of state legislators all across the country. And then they said, and hey, this is a redistricting year, because that happens after the census.
Yep.
We'll help you with that. And so they had very sophisticated software that was created by a very knowledgeable demographer with a political bent. And in the law offices of Michael Beston Friedrich, right across the street from the Capitol, a fellow named Joe Handrick and several others drew maps, and they manipulated lines using the old voting ward data from 2010 when Republicans had won, and they tweaked the vote and tweaked it some more and tweaked it some more and tweaked lines until they got a solid majority, at least 54 assembly seats won by Republicans, even when the Democratic vote was as high as it had ever been.
Wow.
So it's just, there were like 9 iterations of this map, and they chose the most aggressive map. Now, the only reason we know that is because it went to court, and there were open records requests for this information. And there was a lot of back and forth in the courts. And finally, they got these hard drives from computers that had literally had a hammer taken to them to try to destroy the evidence. Yes. And they had to get a digital forensics person to pull this data off to find out how egregious and aggressive this gerrymander was. Not only that, let's just say Nancy was a Republican legislator. Nancy would have had to sign a secrecy agreement, come into the map room, come into the map room, and then only be shown the map of her district. And she would be able to say, oh, well, that looks good, or oh, that's kind of odd, or whatever, but she wouldn't see the whole state, just her district. So there are legislators who voted for these maps, having only seen theirs. Dale Schultz is one of them. He was a Republican Senate leader at the time. And he voted for them and regrets it to this day. It's like, this was an obfuscation of responsibility to be accountable to voters. And it was a manipulation, an intentional manipulation in creating these maps.
And all done in secret.
All in secret. All in secret. And while there were other things going on to distract us, like Act 10.
Yes. We were all holding picket signs on the Capitol Square.
So that's maybe more information than you
wanted. No, that's really
that
helpful.
Sort of brings us, and I think it's important that Democrats had the opportunity in 2009 and didn't take it. And so now we are in this mess. We've had 10 years of lack of cooperation. We've seen people be primaried and the parties go to their respective corners, becoming more and more and more polarized. And, you know, we really just could not afford and still can't afford to have a polarized state legislature. And then to have COVID on top of that and see how unresponsive and really irresponsible the state legislature was in trying to help the governor respond to this crisis in our state. And, you know, I mean, I
think how many
I could go on and on.
Sessions have been
absolutely
called.
Well,
and how many come together and basically close it and go home. They never even talk about the issues.
And how many times the legislature has taken the governor to court over and over again,
rather than
collaborating and doing something for the citizens of the state. If you feel like your voice is not being heard, it's not, because they don't care. They don't have to care. They are guaranteed to get real. And as someone who ran in probably one of the most gerrymandered assembly districts in the state, and that's our district here, Assembly District 42. It is a mess. On what planet does it make sense to have chunks of 5 different counties that have nothing in common? Nothing. And yet within our own county, to split off the 2 largest municipalities and put them into different districts. I mean, these maps, the machinations that they went, they're just
so
mind-boggling.
and it's unbelievable. I live in the Village of Oregon. At the time of the redistricting in 2011, there were 12 wards. They were all in the same. Had all been in the same assembly district and therefore in the same Senate district. Post 2011 redistricting, 5 of the wards are split off. And not only are they in a different assembly district, it's not even in an assembly district that's in the same Senate district. We're in 2
ridiculous
assembly districts and 2 Senate districts. It's ridiculous.
It is. And I think another sad thing, and this from working the polls as well as being involved in local government, I've had people come up to me and be astounded. Well, I thought I was voting for so-and-so over there because that's where I am, right?
Yep.
No, you're not. That's not your district, and so it's confusing for the citizens.
It's absolutely
So,
Absolutely.
in addition to being cut out of a responsible voice in government, they're confused about often confused about what district they're in.
And rightly so. This had been the 47th for umpteen years. And I remember how confused I was. What? We're in 2011. You know, what are we? We're in and we're with who? You know,
and where do they live?
Yeah.
And
what do we have in common? Oh yeah, nothing. And so as someone who has felt called to public service, and many of us feel called to public service, it boggles my mind when people are called to public service, take an oath of office, and then do everything in the opposite way. And I think, you know, I realize that I'm a pipe dreamer, but I like to think when people get elected that the will of their constituents is taken into consideration. And it has been not just frustrating, but heartbreaking to watch our state be the exception in the upper Midwest with what's happening. And there are just so many issues. You've heard me kvetch about the tax dollars being left up for Medicaid expansion. The economic driver of $1.6 billion, and I'm sorry, those are my tax dollars. Those are your tax dollars and your tax dollars and your tax dollars that are sitting in Washington, D.C. That could be a huge economic driver. The money that was left on the table for rail expansion. Think of where we could go if we had a railroad service from Chicago to Minneapolis and all the points in between. How easy would it be to go back and forth? What an economic driver that could be. As someone who suffers with fibromyalgia, medical cannabis. Are you kidding me? And the overwhelming majority of people in the state, over 80%, want medical cannabis. All the states except Iowa around us have medical and recreational. Minnesota just voted for recreational as well. Could we be any more backwards? And to be denying people health care, to deny with the Medicaid expansion, to deny people the health benefits. So we are at a point in time, folks, where we have 2 roads in front of us. One is the status quo, which is letting the party in power recreate these maps. And then we have what the People's Map Commission has been working on and proposing.
Yeah,
and I'm gonna,
so you want to hear a little bit about
please.
that? So not surprisingly, when Governor Evers was elected, in his first budget, he put in money for a nonpartisan redistricting process. That was taken out by the Joint Finance Committee, along with money for public education, which is actually how I got into this whole thing, and other very important things for our state. He decided then that he would create by executive order a People's Maps Commission. He did not appoint the commissioners. I think that's a really important thing. The people who are on the People's Maps Commission applied to be on it. They had to meet several criteria. I think some of the most important of which is they couldn't be an elected official. They couldn't be a lobbyist within the last 5 years. They could not hold office in either of the major political parties or the lesser political parties. They had to be eligible to vote in the state of Wisconsin, and there were a couple more things.
Okay.
I think those are the important ones. And so they applied for these positions. They were vetted, and those who met the criteria were then, those applications were turned over to 3 retired circuit court judges who then chose the 9 commissioners. So there's 1 from each congressional district, 2 from the 4th congressional district. He wanted there to be 9. So if they decided that they were going to vote on things, it would be an odd number. They held hearings, public hearings, with redistricting experts, and each hearing had a theme so that they were learning and able to ask questions of these experts and to hear from the public about what they were concerned about in how their maps were drawn. They liked them, if they didn't, whatever it was. And those were virtual beginning in October of 2020 through March of this year.
Okay.
And they've been collecting written commentary that whole time and are still collecting written commentary. In April, I don't remember the exact date, I'm sorry, they began gathering community of interest maps. So what that means is, like I said, my little village is cut apart. My community of interest is first keep my whole village whole.
Yes.
And as much as the school district is possible. You know, for us, that's a community of interest. We have shared interests. We have shared concerns. We have flooding issues in the village of Oregon. You've probably heard about them. And so, you know, it's that kind of thing. And they can be urban, they can be rural, they can be suburban. But the idea is to have folks have an opportunity to say, this is my community. These are the people with whom I have shared interests. It could be a watershed district. It could be an economic driver, all kinds of things. And to submit those maps to the People's Maps Commission. And they've been working with Tufts University with a lab called MGGG. It's the Metric Geometry and Gerrymandering Group.
I love it. How geeky.
I know.
That's awesome.
I practiced. And so it's free software that's online. And so I work with the Fair Maps Coalition. We did lots and lots of
They can still do it, right?
Yep. Through the end of this week.
Okay.
Yeah. And those maps will be taken by this MGGG group, and they will create a report based on the public testimony, the written commentary, and these maps. They'll create a report for the People's Maps Commission that you know is our input, what we feel as the residents of the state should be in the maps that are created. They have some very specific criteria that they are using. It's all on their website. So if you Google People's Maps Commission, you can find it. If you go to our website, the fairmapswi.com website, you can find information there. 3 or 4 more days to get maps in or written comments in. And it's I think there are 2 or 3 things that I'm very impressed with about them. Everything has happened in the open. So
As
all
it should.
of their
As it should be,
meetings
exactly.
are on YouTube Live. You can watch them as they're happening. They are very responsive. They all have emails. And by the way, these are all volunteers. None of these people are being paid.
Wow.
I know. It's a tremendous
A
public
call
service.
to for our
Yes,
state. I mean,
absolutely.
that's incredible.
And so they will be creating a set of maps that they will present to the state legislature. And the legislature will have the choice to accept these maps that the people of the state have had input into. Now, I'm not optimistic that will happen. I'm just going to put that out there. Speaker Voss has already made it really clear that he's not interested in working with the People's Maps Commission. And so I suspect that maps will be drawn by, in much the same way that they were in 2011 that I described before. And we know that they've already hired attorneys to litigate maps.
that haven't been created yet, folks. Your tax dollars hard at work.
Right. There are no maps at this point. People's Maps Commission hasn't created those maps yet. There probably are some maps somewhere.
I'm guessing. But the fact that we don't even have the data yet officially, and yet our taxpayer dollars are paying attorney fees to defend the folks in power in the legislature for stuff that hasn't even happened yet.
For eventual litigation.
Yeah, it's just, so do you think, folks, that this is going to happen in an open and transparent way? I don't think so. Now, surprise me, legislature, I would be thrilled.
I would love thrilled.
I would love for our elected representatives at the state level, I would love for you to just do the right thing. Just do the right thing.
There will be the choice.
You will have the choice to do the right thing and do what the people of this state have given their time, energy, thoughts, passion, whatever into, and then you can do the wrong thing and sit behind closed doors and do all of your little scheming and plotting to once again water down the will of the people. I'll just remind everybody, last time I checked, this is a democratic republic. And as a democracy, our democracy is broken on so many levels. And this is such a glaring example of how completely messed up things are. There is so much riding on how these districts get redrawn, as far as our state going back to clean government, to being a progressive icon. And by progressive, I just mean perhaps looking forward enough. Making progress, not progressive from the political liberal leaning progressive, but
progress too on the issues, again, that the majority of people say they want action
absolutely
on. Climate change.
Yes.
Public
Medicaid dollars.
Yes, public education. Reducing tuition at our fantastic state schools. I mean, there is just so much that has been not just pushed by the wayside, but we have gone backwards in a state that so many of us took great pride in saying, we're not like our neighbors to the south. We have clean government here. We're not like Illinois. And guess what? In 10 years, it's hard to tell the difference on a whole lot of platforms.
Well, what's ironic is Illinois is gerrymandered by Democrats.
Yeah. So the message there is no one who has anything to gain by redrawing those districts should have anything to do with redrawing the districts. I mean,
I wanted to just get back to your mention that the Friday is the deadline, or this Saturday, to get maps in. There's a wonderful YouTube video out there done by Mary Kay Baum and Dan Folkman. It's 15 minutes. But and I just looked at it because I've been kind of timid about doing this, but it's really a step-by-step how to create a map. And so I would encourage people to do exactly that. Take a look at that YouTube video and submit one. It walks you through and it tells you exactly how to save it and then submit it.
And the nice thing about that video is that you can start it and stop it.
Yes.
And
do it while you're trying.
Right. You can. I showed it to my husband. I said, I've been in this software so much that I don't feel like I can watch this. And he's been like, don't make me do this. So he watched it and he said, I could do this.
Oh, that's excellent.
I could do this. He
that
said,
was exactly my reaction. I thought, because I just felt so overwhelmed by
the thought of it
and that layer. And this is what you can.
And I think the other thing that he said, it's very small town Wisconsin. That was his description of the way it comes across.
Oh, that's excellent.
And the thing is that Mary Kay and Dan they're not 25, right?
Yeah.
It's not like
maybe that was
these are people that are
of an age
for whom software and playing around and
not native to technology.
Yeah.
Oh, that's good to know.
Yeah.
Could have been part of the appeal, and I will admit that. But I thought it was just
demystifies.
Very straightforward.
That's
very
great.
Straightforward.
So Nancy, you mentioned that we got word today when we're going to be getting data, correct?
Correct. The census data is coming out August 16th, and then again on September 30th. And September 16th, it's probably coming out the way it has been.
August 16th.
Or August 16th. the way it was delivered in the past 10 years ago, probably. And then September 30th, it's supposed to be coming out in a more sophisticated way and with more tools so that you can access it and then use different things like Microsoft Access or various scripting programs to actually take a look and go into that data and use it.
Okay.
So data will be coming out there, and it'll be interesting to see. I am anxious to really see what it is, but part of what we've been hearing since now, you might know that the legislature had passed legislation to delay the whole process here in Wisconsin, which Governor Evers vetoed. So now the process is back on, and certainly the county committees will be created, and a lot of them have created them. But one of the complaints was, well, we don't have anything to work with now. We can't get started. But there is a Wisconsin legislative technical
the
body
LTSB, the Legislative Technical Services Bureau.
That has a lot of helpful things as well as some data. And then there is data available from various sources to start with. Now, I don't know, a lot of the committees, depends on the county, I guess, could make use of that to start.
Some counties have citizen boards citizen committees that are starting the process. I know Dane County has a citizen committee, Milwaukee County does, I believe Brown County, Outagamie County, several of them.
Wow.
And what's significant, I think, about that, about those is they are counties that have large urban areas, so they've got a lot to do. And ironically, there are also some of the counties that said, we can get this done. It's not an issue, because there is so much software out there that even we can draw maps with, that makes the process less complicated. Well, it's kind of interesting. I was in I did a lot of mapping workshops a couple weeks ago, one every day. And there was a woman from Common Cause who's based out in California. Her name is Cathay Fang. And she said, there are a couple of reasons for creating community of interest maps. One is, and one of the most important things is, it demystifies this whole process. That the powers that be, who you've talked about, and again, they're Republicans and Democrats, want for it to be really complicated. Like, this is so difficult. You have to, know all of these things in order to be able to do it. Well, we know our communities, right? We know who and where the folks are that have our shared concerns and our shared interests. So we are able to say our whole school district should be in the same assembly district. It shouldn't be cut up. And I've done some mapping with folks in urban areas, and often we start with, well, what are the places that are important in your community, instead of starting with, drawing in areas. What are the places that you would say are the most important places in your community? And then we kind of zoom out and look at that and say, okay, well, would you say that this is your community? And if so, did we capture it all? And if not, what of what we've named here should we leave out? And then we can write about that, describe it, and why that's a really important part of this whole community mapping piece, is the qualitative information. So giving written comment is really also very important, because the qualitative information helps the people making the maps understand why.
And then back to that YouTube video, I thought was interesting too, was the narrative piece. And it wasn't long, it wasn't complicated. It was like maybe 2 or 3 very brief paragraphs. This is why, and again, they were dealing with a sample map, but this is why we drew the map the way it is and what's important about this map. So
that's great.
And I think I have to go back and really look at it again and play with that. But you could do, write your narrative really
Mhm.
in another place, in
Mhm.
whatever or word processing program you use,
Mhm.
and then cut and paste it into the.
Yeah,
Mhm.
that's another way to
into
do
Oh,
it.
that's
to do
cool.
that. So,
And for those of you who are wondering, our school district is split into 2 assembly districts. Town of West Point, Lovering Road, and parts west are in a separate assembly district. So,
Mhm.
and our county is split into 3 different assembly districts. One of the first things when I met with Patty Herman here in our community about communities of interest, the first thing I said is leave the county alone.
Mhm.
Your counties should stay together. That's
Yeah.
we're under the same
in the
government.
2011
and-
redistricting, there are more counties that are divided in the state of Wisconsin than ever before in the drawing of voting districts.
and
I think it's something like 38 counties are
it just
split.
makes
it's interesting because one of the things I have here is the Wisconsin Counties Association County Decennial Redistricting Handbook, and it says one of the things is respecting boundaries.
Right. Well, and that is one of the things that the
Absolutely.
People's
One of the
Maps Commission
guidelines. Yeah.
has identified as one of the things that they want to do is respect political boundaries. So
Mhm.
towns, municipalities, county supervisory districts. Certainly, there are some counties that have to be split,
Mhm.
because the population is too
Yeah.
large.
Yeah.
But there's no reason why Neenah and Menasha should be split between 2 different assembly districts. They consider themselves one. I don't want us to also forget that the only way to fix this is a legislative fix in
Yeah.
the long term. So the People's Maps Commission is doing what we want,
Mm-hmm.
but they're created by executive order. There's no compulsion
Yeah.
for the state legislature to accept those maps. The
Mhm.
only way that we can not do this again in 10 years is to have a legislative fix. And so I think folks should know that there are bills that have been introduced in the state assembly and in the state senate, and I should have written these numbers down. I'll get those numbers for you, but they are calling for a process, a nonpartisan redistricting process
Mm-hmm.
that would be similar to what they use in Iowa.
Mm-hmm.
So, ironically, the Iowa model has been in effect since the 80s.
And is a model that is upheld as a
Correct, as
really
something that
model.
works really well. They use what would be the equivalent of our Legislative Reference Bureau, which is a civil servant body, nonpartisan. They hold hearings all around the state. They collect information from much like what the People's Maps Commission did. Then they collect information. They put together a report and a map for the state legislature, which the state legislature then approves or doesn't approve. They've approved every one in Iowa's history. Our state constitution basically says about the same thing as Iowa's does. Our state legislature has not drawn, physically taken pen and paper or computer software. They've hired people to do it.
Okay.
And then they have approved those maps. That's the same thing that this bill calls for the state legislature to approve the maps and then send them to the governor, whoever the governor may be, for signature. Now, the Iowa model can't just be picked up and brought over and put down in Wisconsin because demographically we have a lot more diversity in our state than Iowa does. Our population distribution is much different. Theirs is more
evenly spread throughout the state.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of how to say that. Where we have more urban centers, we have more racial diversity in our state. Our educational diversity is, we have quite a range. So it can't just be picked up and put down, but with modifications and this legislation that has been proposed, and I'm going to look it up in just a second.
Okay.
Is in committee right now.
Really?
So they're in the state senate. It's in the government operations committee.
Okay.
And in the state assembly, it is in the state affairs committee.
Okay.
And so on September 27th, we are going to be having a lobby day in Madison. We're going to ask that people come from all over the state. We'll do some training in the morning, have some speakers who know what they're talking about, help people figure out what they want to say, and then we'll go over to the Capitol and call on legislators.
Excellent.
So we're in,
Because you want a public hearing, it's what you want for these two pieces of legislation.
and we want there to be, right now there are 3 Republicans who have co-sponsored this with all the Democrats. So those are Travis Tranel, Todd Novak, and Joel Kitchens. So 2 in the western corner of the state and 1 in Door County.
Okay.
But we want more Republican co-sponsorship. And you know what? I really do think that most people who go into public service go into public service for the right reasons. Yeah. And sometimes there's inordinate pressure put upon them.
True.
To follow a party line.
Yeah.
Sometimes they get into a position of power and it kind of skews their vision. So having their constituents right
loud
there
and vocal,
I think is always a good thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
We're the people that are you should be responsive to.
And thanks to a lot of the work that Fair Maps has done and other groups, there has been demonstrated across the state now, and is it 52 counties, Carlene, that have approved?
55 county boards
55 now, okay.
have approved a resolution calling for a nonpartisan redistricting process, calling on the legislature to create a nonpartisan, and 32 counties voters have voted
on referendum.
Now, not in Columbia County.
Oh yeah, we tried to get it on the ballot here.
But 32 counties, and by overwhelming majorities.
Never less than 70%, right?
Well, no, less than 70%, but it's an average of 70%.
Okay.
So the county that passed it with the least majority, Donald Trump won there by 70% in Rusk County.
Okay.
The same election, November 2020, Rusk County passed that referendum by 57%. So clearly this cross-party lines. This is, and the Marquette Law School poll shows 72% of Wisconsinites want a nonpartisan process. This is, and when you look at how the counties voted in presidential elections in 2016 and in 2020, it's so clear that this is nonpartisan because Republican counties and Democratic counties have voted on this.
Another issue that just makes a whole lot of sense for the benefit of all of us.
Absolutely.
To pursue.
So Nancy, at the county level, so for those of you wondering, yes, we will get the data here, and the city of Lodi, I'm not sure what our marching orders are. The city used to be divided into wards and alders. We used to have 2 alders elected from each ward. We, a couple years ago, 4 years ago, went to an at-large alder election because in a community the size of ours, we often felt that you don't just represent your ward in the city, you represent the whole city essentially. So we no longer use wards when you're voting for the city, but the districts that we work on here will get fed in at the county level. So what happens at the county level?
Well, one thing that has to happen and did just happen in June, Columbia County now has a decennial redistricting committee has been established. And coming up next week, Thursday, actually, they're going to have their first organizational meeting.
Okay.
And their first task will be to decide, do we keep the same number of supervisory districts or do we change that number? If there's changes, then that affects, of course, the boundaries within the county. But that's the first thing that they do. And then they also decide whether the committee is going to draw the proposed, there will be a proposed county map, as it were. whether they will do that with the committee or whether they'll hire a consultant to do it.
Okay.
My suspicion, I don't know this, I'm looking forward to attending this meeting next week. The Sue Mall, who is our county clerk,
Mm-hmm.
and the head of our land information are ex officio to this committee. And
Okay.
I suspect that our land information person will be heavily involved, if
Instrumental in-
not
yeah.
doing
Mhm.
the map. So
Mhm.
that's kind of the first step. And then they also next week will be establishing the guidelines for the
Kind of
county
the guiding
redistricting,
principles
what
or,
the principles are. Like you
Okay.
mentioned earlier, they're supposed to be respecting ward districts within the area, within the county and
Mhm,
municipalities. If they intend to make changes, then the municipalities have to be informed, and there has to be
involved,
a back and forth.
Mm-hmm.
And then they will be looking at a timeline,
Okay.
is my understanding, because as we just talked about a little bit ago, Governor Evers vetoed that legislation that would have delayed the process till next year sometime. So now there will be the statutory guidelines will be held the way they were. Some of them have already passed,
Mm-hmm.
but they will be working, at least as my understanding is, they will have to work with them the
Yeah.
way they are.
Yeah.
mhm.
And when the county board chair announced the first meeting last week, he said there was the potential of 2 county board meetings in September.
Okay.
So in order to meet, there is 60 days from this point that they get the data, then there's 60 days beyond that they have to hold a public hearing.
Okay.
But that's being squished now because
Yeah.
by December 1, right,
Yeah,
Carleen?
December 1.
They have to turn something into the state.
Okay.
So that there will be some compressed
Mhm.
deadlines.
Okay.
But people should look at the county website.
Mhm.
They're under committee meetings and agendas that it should be posted
Mm-hmm.
for next week. I believe it is next Thursday.
Excellent.
So we'll see what happens after that. But
And
that's
if
kind
you're
of the
interested,
process.
I know Nancy would be willing to have you contact her. You're going to be attending the meetings. So, Nancy can walk you through what's going on or.
I'll share what knowledge I have.
Mhm.
Sometimes it's very minimal, but I'm happy to share
Join the club.
or attempt to, because again, this is where the process starts. And so I think it's another process. I guess we want to certainly get people involved in the creation of maps, but this is the statutory process and where it has to start.
Yeah.
So,
Right.
yeah.
And, the maps for the state have to be done by April of 2022 in order for people who are running for state assembly
Exactly.
and state senate and for US Congress to know where the districts are. So there is a timeline here
Mhm.
that needs to be met in spite of the fact that we, don't have the data yet.
Yeah.
So everything is going to be a foreshortened process.
Mhm.
And we have really sophisticated software now
Yeah,
that helps us with
that
that.
can do
It's
that.
not like we're pulling out a map and enlarging it on the wall and trying to. I mean, I was a teacher for a really long time, and we went from chalkboards to overhead projectors to smart boards to Zoom.
Yes,
So
yes.
there's technology in the redistricting world has advanced as well. I want to go
Yes.
back to something
Bill.
so that the legislation numbers in
Okay.
the Senate,
Mhm.
it's Senate Bill or SB 389,
Okay.
and that's the one that's in the Government Operations Committee.
Okay.
And the Assembly Bill or AB is AB 395,
85. Okay.
and it is in the Committee on State Affairs.
State Affairs. So I will look up if any of our local reps are on either one of those
I think
committees.
you want to look at it right
Yeah, so
here. There's the
Ballweg or
list.
Plummer.
There's the list. I don't think either one of them
Okay.
is on there.
I don't see. Nope. So
But those are the committees. But you can contact your local folks and say, "Hey,
support this or
Yeah.
tell the committee you want a hearing on this,"
Mhm.
because right now those bills are languishing
Mhm.
in those committees.
Okay.
And so it's really important to contact them.
That's
And
very
if
helpful.
people are interested in this, we send out a monthly newsletter.
Mhm.
And all that contact information is there, or it's on our Facebook page on a regular basis. Every
Fantastic.
week I post actions people can take
Yes, she
on
does.
this. And yes, she does. Nancy
Yes,
knows.
Carlene
She
is,
sees them.
if you're in a meeting with Carlene, she's doing this all
Yeah,
the
this
time.
is-
It's
this is
fantastic.
really
She lives
weird.
doing, it's
To
amazing.
not have a
Yeah.
keyboard in front
Stop,
of me.
stop typing. No, I'm kidding. I want to put a plug in for the lobby day. If you are intimidated about going to see your representatives, doing it as part of a lobbying day
Oh, absolutely.
is fantastic. I have annoyed representatives a few times as part of different organizations' lobbying days. I've done it at the state and the federal level, and it's a great way to get your feet wet, get great training. They help you kind of role play what you're going to say or write out a script ahead of time. So if you're intimidated by having a conversation, it's just a really good way to feel more comfortable contacting your representatives.
And I think it's really important to remember that we elect our representatives, and they're people like us, and they live in Wisconsin just like us
in our communities.
And it's, we elect them to be responsive to the things that we care about, and that's their job.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely.
That is their job,
and we pay their salaries.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. And so it should not. We should never feel, not that. I mean, I've certainly been there where it's like, okay, the first time,
Yeah,
I
it's a little
was
scary.
shaking.
Yeah.
And then somebody said something that really kind of ticked me off, and it was like, okay, you clearly don't know what education stuff. And that was all it took.
The door opened up.
Right. My friend was next to me. Don't jump out of your chair.
You're one of those people too. Yeah, I have friends doing that. I've had the hand on my leg under a table, digging in as they know I'm going to. Yeah, the older I get, the harder it is to breathe and not blurt my thoughts out.
Yeah.
Well, these are intense issues. And
They
I-
are.
and I think it doesn't hurt to have passion.
Oh,
Something
absolutely.
that is so critical to all of us, and so
Mhm.
many issues, as we talked about earlier, that impact
Absolutely.
all of us. And getting people
Yeah.
to come together, let's at least talk about them.
Exactly.
And if you don't care about this, think about your kids and your grandkids and eventually your great grandkids and what we are leaving them. The worker shortage that we're experiencing now, the seeds for this were planted a decade ago.
Mhm.
I advised students at the University of Wisconsin-Madison for 30 years. And all of a sudden, in the last 8 years I was on campus, I was hearing from kids born and raised in Wisconsin saying, I don't see myself here anymore.
Oh.
That
Yeah.
our young graduates are flocking to Chicago and Minneapolis and all over the world. But to hear them say that they don't feel a part of the direction our state is going. And as someone, who, now I will be the first to admit I'm a wonk about all this and a total political nerd, and I own every bit of that. But what really irritates me as a taxpayer is so much of what happens right now is done with this short lens. So what's going to be expedient right now?
Mhm.
And if you know anything about your own budgeting, about your own planning for your life and your family and whatever, you don't do stuff with what looks good today and screw tomorrow. That's just not reality.
Mhm.
And when we have been doing that so much, there's so much that hasn't been addressed, or there are taxpayer dollars being spent all the time on what looks good right now with no thought to
Foxconn.
5, 10, Foxconn is a great example. Climate change issues. We have to be thinking long-term, and we have to be electing people who have the political the courage to get into office and say, I might not be here next term, but by God, I'm going to do what's right while I'm sitting here.
Mhm.
And I agree with Carlene and I'm too often forgetting and jumping into forgetting that people are just, people want to do good. People want to do the best job they can. And people don't go into a political office or a job or a career thinking, I want to suck at this and I want to do everything that's against the oath that I just took. That is not reality.
Mhm.
There are powers and levers at play here that have made Wisconsin be the way it is right now. And it's time for us to take the power back. And it has to start with this gerrymandering. once we get past this, there's so much that can happen and
yeah.
happen quickly to improve our state. So, and I will put in the bug that I put in every one of these live streams. Think about running for office. Local offices, county, village, town, city, all happen in April. So you will need to, district lines for some of these don't come into play all that much, but you will have to circulate nominating papers in December. I will say again, if you think you have nothing to contribute to a governing board, think again. All we need is your life experience, your thoughts, your passion, your caring about family, friends, and neighbors, whatever. We need your head around the table. The decisions we make, the planning we do will only be as healthy and robust as the diverse group of folks sitting around the table to make these decisions. So it takes all of us, folks. It takes every one of us to care more about one another than about ourselves, or at least care about others anyway, maybe not more about ourselves, but to at least give a rip. So I ask you to please consider getting involved. My last plug here is you're going to be seeing at the Susie Day Parade a wonderful colleague here in the community, Sarah Kieski, who is the owner of Therapy Mudita. Sarah is stepping forward to create a day of service that will happen in May of 2022 called Lift Lodi, and stay tuned for more details, but you'll see us traipsing in the Susie Parade, handing out information about how to get involved. So whether you want to run for office or you just want to help pick up litter or do some errands for some, or spruce up somebody's yard who can't afford it or isn't able to, we're going to demonstrate how to love where we live in May with Lift Lodi, and stay tuned for more details.
Could I make a
Absolutely.
plug too?
Absolutely.
I want to circle back to the newsletter and work of Fair Maps. One of the things that I just read there is an article called "Is Gerrymandering Forever?" And I think you were contacted by someone to put this together. And it is a wonderful summary of what happened here in Wisconsin with gerrymandering, and very well written, concise, not terribly
Patty Herman's
long.
in it.
Oh, our local Patty Herman.
Yes,
Hot
it's in
damn.
there.
That's awesome.
So quoted in there. So it's probably a librarian in me, but I encourage people to research, take a look, and there's a lot of wonderful resources out there on redistricting and gerrymandering and so on. But this one is
it was the feature article for In These Times magazine.
Yeah.
They did
I just started subscribing to that. That's a great magazine.
On
so
Wisconsin grassroots efforts to end this.
And we are known, Wisconsin has been known for its grassroots efforts. So
that's my plug.
Thank you. That is a beautiful plug. And on that note, National Night Out on the 3rd, Susie Day on the 14th, and all the festivities around those. We'll be back again sometime in August when I figure out when. So thanks, Blaze, to the Lodi Valley Chronicle. Thanks to Carlene and Nancy. Everybody stay safe, mask up, take care of yourselves, get vaccinated. Thanks.
And we're out.